Thank you very much, and welcome. Well, my task this evening is to frame tonight's debate, and I frankly find it a bit challenging. Unlike most of our debates which speak to policy, this one is about facts. Islam has some 1.5 billion adherents. Muslims in America seem quite well integrated into our society. Arabs account for only 25% of all Muslims. The majority are found throughout Asia. But the radical Islamic movement in the Arab world, their doctrines of jihad, holy war, their tactics of terror, that's what sort of shapes our view. Well, is this view distorted? The polling data is not reassuring. Consider the following examples. In Pakistan, Indonesia, Morocco, and Egypt, between 73% and 92% believe that the U.S. goal is definitely or probably to weaken and divide Islam. In the same countries, only 9 to 23% believe that the goal of the U.S. war on terror is to protect itself from terror attacks. In those countries, around 20% of those surveyed supported al-Qaeda's attacks on Americans, and more than 70% agreed with such al-Qaeda goals as deterring U.S. support for Israel, pushing Western values and Western militaries out of Islamic countries, and affirming Muslim dignity by standing up to America. And it's astonishing to note that only between 2 and 35% of those polled identified al-Qaeda as behind the 9/11 attacks. In contrast, 20 to 38% identified the U.S. or Israel as the perpetrators of 9/11. And to end on a deeply confusing note, in Egypt, 88% agree that groups like al-Qaeda that use violence against civilians are violating the principles of Islam, yet 60% believe that suicide bombers are often or sometimes justified. Well, what are we to make of all of this? From a geopolitical standpoint, are the radicals the only ones who matter? Does their organization, intensity, and violence effectively intimidate more moderate voices? Are we engaged, in Samuel Huntington's formulation, in a clash of civilizations? Or is that precisely the characterization that the radicals hope to provoke? I'm confident that tonight's panel can shed some light. And it's my pleasure to turn the evening over to our longtime radio host and the host of NPR's All Things Considered, Robert Siegel.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, and I'd like to welcome you to this, the 9th debate of the second Intelligence Squared U.S. series. The resolution that's being debated tonight is Islam is dominated by radicals, and I'm going to give you a brief rundown of the evening. Members of each team will alternate in presenting their side of the argument. Presentations are strictly limited to 7 minutes each. When opening arguments are complete, I'll open up the floor to brief questions from the audience. And after the Q&A session, each debater will make a final 2-minute summation. And finally, you will vote on tonight's motion with the keypad that's attached to the armrest of your seat, and I'll announce your decision on which side carried the day. I'd like now to introduce the panel, and please hold your applause until all 6 of our panelists are introduced. For the motion, first the Vice President at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, David Gartenstein-Ross, Senior Fellow in the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, Paul Marshall, and Professor in the Practice of Journalism at Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies and former Wall Street Journal reporter, Asra Nomani. Against the motion, Assistant Professor of Creative Writing at the University of California, Riverside, and Fellow at the University of Southern California Center on Public Diplomacy, Reza Aslan, Professor of History at Columbia University, Richard Bulliet, and Director of Communications for the Muslim Public Affairs Council, Edina Lekovic. Those are our 6 panelists.